Hey everybody, this is Jacob from PPC Hero, and today I'm going to talk to you about heat maps in Excel. More specifically, how to use a heat map to evaluate your AdWords performance over the day of the week and hour of the day. Why this is important is, kind of looking through here, we can kind of evaluate and say, look, Tuesday is at 300 hours. It looks like I'm getting a lot less clicks than Mondays at 2100 hours. So there's a difference there, but how do I quantify it and what can I do about it? More specifically, moving on, how can this inform me on what to do with my bid modifiers? It seems like, kind of just comparing these two like this, it could get very tedious if I keep kind of going one by one, trying to compare to one another and pull out a general trend. Well, what you can do with a heat map, which is a data visualization that maps a color scheme to a set of values, is kind of use this visualization to discover patterns or areas of opportunity or areas where you're spending too much. Maybe you find during certain times of the day that your CPA is too high, which means maybe you should go in, get a bid modifier, and bid down during those periods. Likewise, you may find Tuesdays and Friday mornings convert very well for you, and you are down well under your CPA goal, meaning you can probably afford to bid up a little bit and maybe pull in a few extra conversions and be a bit more competitive in the market. So the first thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and download a report. This one's just a campaign report, and make sure it's segmented by day of the week and hour of the day. This is going to let us build a pivot table and sort through that data rather than kind of going one by one like we talked about. So now that I have this data, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to create a pivot table from it. And now I'm on my first pivot table. Now this is going to be kind of an intro. We might not pull a whole lot out of this, but it's a good experience to show you, how this works. So what I have right here is a pivot table, and my rows are hours of the day, and then I have a set of values as my columns. As you can see right here, I have my sum of clicks, impressions, cost, conversions, and calculated fields for my click-through rate and my CPA. So how do I go ahead and build this heat map? One thing to keep in mind is all of these metrics here are all different. You can kind of think of them as existing on their own little spectrums. It wouldn't make much sense to compare the value of the clicks directly to the value of impressions, and I'll show you why this is the case in a second. So if I was going to select these two, maybe I want to build a heat map out of these values, I can go to conditional formatting, go to my color scales, and there's a few in here, all of them are pretty good, and you can kind of switch around to see just which one do you prefer. I'm going to use this one, green, yellow, and red. That's a pretty good way to represent it because we associate it with traffic lights, green being good or go, yellow meaning kind of be cautious, or red as in you should stop or it's bad. So we compare this, and what's happened here is the low values are colored red and the good ones are colored green, and this is the best representation of, if you're doing something like this with different metrics, you're going to want to put a different map for each set, because just because the impressions are so high, because you're never going to have 100% click-through rate, all of your clicks are now red, saying that they're bad, but they're all red. It doesn't tell me how they differ from one another. So what I'm going to do, go in here, my conditional formatting, I'm going to clear the rules, and I'm going to apply a map just to this column right here. And similarly to, we didn't want to include the impressions, I'm only going to go for the actual values. I'm not going to put this grand total because as you can imagine, the grand total is going to be way more than anything in here for the individual cells. So I go back in, I apply it, and now I can see there's definitely, my lowest point of traffic is between, it looks like maybe 3 or 4 a.m. and about 10 a.m. and then it gradually picks up about midnight and then tapers back off again. So this kind of tells me where the clicks are coming in. We kind of do the same thing over here. So you have still kind of a very similar pattern right here. Now this one's a little different. This might actually tell us, if the colors of this cost don't really line up with the clicks and the impressions, it means maybe for some reason I'm just paying too much during those periods. But it looks pretty similar, I'm spending most of my spend where I'm getting a lot of my clicks and impressions, which is kind of what you would expect. There's nothing, really weird that jumps out here. So just keep on moving along. And this is kind of interesting. Of course, we're looking at these smaller values right here, but if you look in here, I'm getting my highest click-through rates during this period in here, but for some reason I'm not getting as many clicks in this area. I mean, it could just be, it looks like we're getting a lot more impressions and we just aren't getting as many clicks in there. So let's actually go to the CPA and let's see actually how that differs. Because that's actually, what we're interested in. Clicks and impressions, they're interesting, but they don't always help me meet my actual goal of, getting a lead for a certain cost and just making sure these conversions are as cheap as possible and fit within my business goals. So I'm going to go in, and one thing to keep in mind here is before we kind of said, the low values, we want those to be red because, we want more exposure, we want more clicks. So the red is going to show us where we're lacking. Of course, on CPA, on the other hand, it's kind of the reverse. You don't want a high CPA, you want a lower CPA. So what we're going to do is this color scale, and instead of applying the green, yellow, red, we're going to put it in reverse, making the high values red and the lower values green. So in here I can look, and it's kind of interesting. It looks like right here I'm spending quite a bit of money, kind of like we're looking at click-through rate, and have a lot higher CPA. This doesn't exactly tell you what you should do, because one of the issues we talked about earlier is maybe you want to push your date range back, because if you have a small sample size, it can look really ugly, which is going to happen in our next pivot table we're going to build. Okay, so now we're going to actually dig right into what you can do about your mobile bid, not your mobile bid modifiers, but your modifiers for the time and day. So what I have right here is broken down a pivot table with hours of the day as my rows and my days as columns, and then I use a calculated field for the CPA, which then kind of gives me a bearing on where my CPA is at each combination of these. So here's Monday across every hour, Tuesday across every hour, as well as looking at the hour level, how does it compare across the days. Now, unlike the last one, what we're going to look at here is this is all the same metric, so it's fine if I just go ahead and select everything. Go in there, and then kind of similar to what we talked about CPA on the last example, I'm just going to apply it like that. So my red values are my high values, and my green values are my low values, which are what I want. Now, one thing that's going to stick out here, and it's going to throw everything off, is look, everything looks really yellow in here. That's because we have these outliers here, which is kind of an issue of a sample size. That's why I had thought, maybe 30 days isn't long enough, because it just happens that Friday at 10 p.m. during these last few weeks, just not a lot has happened. I can go, reference that later and say, am I just short some conversions? It's just like a little glitch kind of in the system. Not a glitch with AdWords, but just those little oddities that pop up. Nothing ever works exactly as you expect it to. So I'm going to come in here. And thanks to Sam Owen for, he really put this a lot clearer than I could have. But one of the things you can do is you can customize these color scales. So I'm going to go into my color scales. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to manage my rules. So we didn't talk about this earlier, but we have these custom rules, and you can define your color ranges more custom rather than using the drop-down menu. And you can also show how you want to define your minimums and maximums. Of course, here we want to keep it the same, the minimum being our lowest value and the maximum being our highest value in the table. But right here, if you look, what we've been doing up so far is just using the standard percentile for this, for the coloring. So the 50% is going to be yellow, and then as far as they differ from this 50th percentile from the average of the values, we're going to get more green or more red. But one of the things we do have with CPA is we know where we want our CPA to be. So necessarily you might see some things in here that you're saying that's not that great of a CPA. In this case we're going to show my CPA goal for right here is closer to 10. That's my aspirational goal. That's where I want to be. But according to this, because we have these weird little values in here with 53.95, it really throws it off and just says, there's not much difference here between $15 and $9. So almost $6 over goal or almost $1 under goal. So what I can do here is change this to a number. And what I'll do instead, I'll set my goal as my midpoint. And this will tell me, based on my goal, how far off I am during that period of time. So go through that. I'm going to keep the same color scale. I'm going to hit OK. And now you can see how that changes. You can see I have a lot more green. I just have a few outliers here that, go ahead and say, aren't green. It seems like a good split, but there's definitely a lot more green telling me that, these areas right here are areas where I'm well under my CPA goal. It looks like Monday mornings are actually really good for me, where on the last one, before I kind of normalized this around my goal, it was saying all of this was yellow, so it was all just kind of decent. But looking at our actual goal, it looks like the mornings are actually very good for me, and I should probably start bidding up at least slightly during these periods, as well as we see a lot of yellow in here. We're kind of looking at the actual values of some 11, 13. So we're starting to drift away on some of these days. So I might go in and start bidding down on some of these days to see how it affects it. And then, later down the road, I can take this knowledge, knowing that I made these bid adjustments, and then, pull this table again later and see how it compares. Now, where do you go from here? One thing to keep in mind is this is running the entire account. And of course, if you are trying to stay on top of things, you want to separate out your devices and especially your networks. Your display network and your search network are going to perform very differently, both in terms of click-through rate, probably your conversion rates, and maybe even your CPAs. So you want to split those out so you get a more accurate picture. So maybe next time I would go in, and instead of just having it parted by the day of the week and the hour a day, I'd also include device type, so I could see, where am I losing on mobile, or where can I make up ground on mobile, as well as where am I hurting on desktop and tablet, and where could I gain from it. So I hope that helps, and you can do this with almost any metric. Actually, you could also do this with your clicks, your click-through rates, your impressions. If that's something you're interested in, just trying to get that brand exposure, you could do that, and that's pretty easy. We'll show that real quickly. So I take that out. And that's one thing. If you're doing it like this, you probably just want to have one value, because otherwise it gets all split up and you kind of lose those general trends. So we'll pull that out. And one thing I'm going to do is it's set to count. I'm going to sum it up. I'm going to change that away from accounting, because we had it on numbers before because we were looking at the CPA. Go ahead, I'm going to apply my color scheme. Oops, I shouldn't have applied it to the grand total. Easy enough to fix. Clear rules. And now, and then now you have your clicks, so you could also do this by the other metrics like we talked about, maybe your spend, and try and see where your spend actually is. So I hope this helped, and if you've done anything similar or found anything very helpful in formatting these graphs, feel free to comment, or any other graphs or tools you've been using. So take care until next time. Goodbye.